So we're going to learn about the basics of SQL, which is also called as SQL sometimes. Let's look at the name and try to break it. So SQL is structured query language. Structured, i- it refers because it deals with data which is already is in some structured format like tables or a defined format, which we will look at an example. So that's the structure part. Query because it gives an ability to retrieve, manipulate, and interact with data. Uh, so we can actually query data if we have any questions about the data or we want to select something from the data. So it gives us those abilities. And the last bit, language, because it does allow us to interact with the data which is stored in a database. So it's like a formal language which we can use to interact with the data which is stored. Now, so it was actually created at IBM in early 1970s, and the main motive behind was to be able to manage and manipulate relation databases. Now, databases could be of different types, but we are just going to talk about relation databases here. And a database is, if we just want to understand what database is, so basically when we are interacting with any website or any app, any data that we enter online or a software, anything you use, it they do have a database behind where that data is stored. So for example, if I just log into my Facebook account, I see a lot of things already there, which, let's say, some settings I or let's say I just turned on the dark mode on a website, and every time I go back I see it, irrespective of if I even try, if I just use it on a different browser or a different machine, I see the moment I log in, it knows that I need that dark color to be there. And the way it does is, because that data is stored somewhere, and it just goes and get it for me, and then give us and use that data to show us the dark mode. So that data is basically in a database somewhere. Now it may not be a relational database, could be something else, but for this SQL understanding, I think we're just going to talk about the relational databases. So it is actually a very powerful tool. SQL is a very powerful tool for anyone who deals with the data which is stored in a relational database. So so relational database is, uh, in the relational database, the data is basically stored as tables. So it's already got a structure, and that's how we define the structure, and that's how, and then when data comes in, it just gets stored there. And there are a lot of so tools which are now um, which are designed to manage these relation databases, and those tools are broadly called as RDBMS, Relational Database Management System. So there are a lot of vendors which does offer all these softwares. So the few examples here, like MySQL is there, PostgreSQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, there are many more. So these tools basically allow us to manage the data which is stored in a relational database, and then also give us the ability to query and create more tables, delete tables, and all those things in that database. But for that, it uses SQL that we just talked about in the previous slide. So SQL gives us the ability. So all these vendors, they support SQL. So we can use SQL with any of these. There might be some differences, but basically, if you look at the basic operations like selecting, we want to get some data, we want to delete some data, we want to filter out some data. So all those things are going to be same. So because SQL is a standard that they all follow, and and the same SQL, more or less same SQL, would is going to work on all of them. Now, next we're going to look at the tables, like what is a table basically. So because relational database store data in a table. So if you look at this table, it is a small sample table here, which is for, let's say, some employees in a company. Now, if you look at the table has got, so if we table is basically divided into rows and columns. So if you see these horizontal 4 entries, these are called rows, and then we have these vertical uh, columns. They're also called fields, columns of fields, and rows could also be like records. So so here if we have name, age, department, and salary for an employee. Now the column in the table contains very specific information for every row, right? So if we look at the first row, which is name 1, so here we are talking about a person or an employee whose name is name 1, age is 20, department is there, and also we have the salary. And then we have similar 3 more rows where we have name 2, name 3, name 4, and the age and respective department and salary. Now, when we use SQL, it helps us in creating, updating, or even querying the data which is stored in uh, these uh, these tables, because that's the structure part of the SQL name which we talked about earlier. So because the data is structured, now SQL can work with this data and help us getting these or manipulate these details. Um, Next, what it can do. So it can help us to fetch data from a table. It can also help us to insert new data. So if we need to insert new data, that's possible. There can be an update as well. We could update some entries. So in this example, if you look at, let's say we want to update the salary of name, employee name, having name 3, that's possible. Then we can also get rid of something which is no longer, let's say somebody left the department, let's say name 2 left now, no longer part of this company. So we might have to delete that entry. So that's possible. And then filter data. So let's say I want to take an example, give me the list of employees whose salary is greater than 20,000. So the result should, sorry, the result has to be name 3 and 4. So SQL can handle that as well. So these are some basic operations which all the database vendors that we talked about should support. But then there are other complex operations like creation of functions, views. Let's say we have 2 different tables, um, and we need some data from both of them. Then how can we join the data together so that those things are also possible? And then managing permissions. So if let's say our database is used by a lot of users, these will basically be guys who work in the software, but not actually users, because they will not have access to these tables. But even there, we could have different permissions. So SQL can handle that as well for us. So these are some basic operations uh, which SQL can do. So just to recap, so we looked at what SQL is, when it was created, what briefly what is a relational database and RDBMS, and then we looked at the various operation that SQL can help us do on the data which is stored in a relation database. So that's it for this one. And next we are going to look at some of the SQL commands. So SQL is basically, um, so when we interact with the database, so do it through commands. So SQL commands are divided into different categories. So we are going to look at them in detail, and maybe we'll look at some examples as well on a real database. So see you in the next one. Thank you.